Our guest today is Michael Franzese. He is the founder of Franzese Wine, and they won Best Wine at last year's Grand Tasting Awards. But long before he got into the wine business, he was in the crime business. As a capo in the Colombo crime family, Michael is one of the biggest moneymakers in the history of the mafia. And today we're going to discuss his journey since then, and the learnings and skills that he acquired along the way, and how he puts them into use with his ventures today. So Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So for those handful of people in the audience who may not know, can you share your history with them, how you got into it, your rise within the Colombo family, and some of the activities in which you were involved?
Well, I can give you a thumbnail sketch, a real quick bio on that. My dad was the underboss, second in command of the Colombo family, one of the five New York mafia Cosa Nostra families. And my dad was a very high-profile figure. He was kind of like the John Guy of his day during the 60s and early 70s. And initially, my dad was always under investigation, always a major target of law enforcement. So I grew up kind of hating police, hating the government, and that was my lifestyle. And in my dad was indicted several times in the state of New York for some very serious crimes, went to trial, was always acquitted in those cases. But then in 1966, he was indicted in the federal court for masterminding a nationwide string of bank robberies. He gets convicted on that case, and in 1967 gets sentenced to 50 years in prison. It was the longest sentence for a bank robbery conspiracy case ever given up to that point. And in 1970, he went off to Leavenworth Penitentiary to do his time. I was a pre-med student at Hofstra University. I was going to be a doctor when my dad went in. And Joe Colombo, who was the boss of our family, he kind of took me under his wing. I started meeting a lot of my dad's friends. Mike, what are you doing going to school? If you don't help your father out, he's going to die in prison. So I was very impacted by that. I love my dad. He was my hero, my idol growing up. And I went to visit him in Leavenworth, and I said, Dad, if I don't help you out, they're going to die in here. To make a very long story short, we kind of argued back and forth a little bit. And, I made up my mind that I wasn't going to go to school. I was going to try to help him out because people, I'll tell you this, I went to jail for a crime that I was guilty of. I did my time. And my dad did a lot of bad things in that life. So did I during that time. But that particular case that he was convicted and given 50 years, my dad was innocent. He was no bank robber. And I'll take that to my grave. Investigated that case thoroughly. We spoke to every witness that testified against him. They recanted their testimony. We gave them lie detector tests, proved they lied at the trial. We can never get the conviction or the term. My dad ended up doing 40 years on that 50. And, but at that point I said, Dad, I'm not going to school. I'm going to help you out. And he said to me, son, if you're going to be on the street, I want you on the street the right way. And in his mind, the right way was to become a member of his life. So at that point, he proposed me for membership for the life, because you can't just walk to somebody and say, hey, I like to drawing. What do I have to do? Somebody has to propose you, vouch for you. And in my case, it was my dad. So I was 19 years old at that point, and make a very long story short, I went through a 2.5-year kind of pledge period where I had to prove myself worthy to become a member. And then in 1975, on Halloween night, I took an oath and became a sworn made member of the Colombo family. And quite honestly, people, it was an oath I took very seriously back then. I take it seriously today, even when I don't consider myself a member of that life anymore. You come into the life, you don't sign a contract, there's no retirement age, and you say, I'm done. They say when you leave that life, you either leave in the coffin or you join the government into a witness protection program. And obviously I haven't done either at that point. But again, long story short, I spent about 20 some odd years in that life, and rose from the position of soldier to a capo-regime, a captain. And I had a pretty big crew for a number of years until I made the fateful decision of deciding to walk away at some point. I know you're going to ask me about that, Russ. No. That's the backstory.
So now you mentioned in the past, you're a racketeer versus a guest, right? Can you describe, what's the difference in that type of mob guy?
Well, yeah, there's kind of two classes of people in that life, the racketeer and the gangster. And in our family, the Colombo family, we had about 115 made guys that actually took the oath. we had a lot of associates, but 115 made guys. Out of that 115, maybe 20 of us were really earners. And so we were kind of the racketeers. The gangsters, they didn't really know how to use the life to benefit them in business. So they were, just trying to get a no-show job. And they did a lot of the heavy work, I would say. So a gangster really didn't have the ability to be a racketeer because you just didn't know how to do it. But a racketeer had evolved. Yeah. Because at some point in time, you're going to get called upon to do certain things.
Gotcha. So just as an example of one of the things that you did, I know there's a couple of convenience store petroleum operations here. Can you talk a little bit about the gasoline taxing?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was kind of fortunate, man. I knew how to use that life to benefit being business, and I had a lot of different businesses other than the traditional gambling operation that I had. And obviously, we all lent money out on the street, those of us that had money to lend. A lot of people are doing that now. I don't know, in California, you have more usurious rates than we ever had on the street. It's crazy now. It's legal now. But anyway, and then I had a lot of different operations. I had 2 car dealerships. I had a couple of restaurants. I had a film production company that I was involved in. But the biggest racket and something that I'm probably most known for on the street was I devised a scheme to defraud the government out of tax on every gallon of gasoline. And I ran that operation for about 7 years. I had the Russian mob guys from Barton Beach were my partners. And at the height of my operation, I had about 350 gas stations I either owned or operated. And I had 18 companies that were licensed to collect tax on every gallon and then sell it. And at the height of our operation, we were selling 500 million gallons of gas a month, taking down 30 or 40 cents a gallon, whatever the market would bear. So it was, it was probably the most lucrative operation that we had ever since the days of Prohibition. It was huge.
A lot of money. So positive transformation is a major theme of your life now. What led to this transformation and how has it impacted your life since?
Well, it's very significant for me to be here in Florida. I used to live here, and I was producing a movie here in South Florida back in 1984. And Smokey Robinson had brought me a screenplay to develop, and we filmed it here in Florida. And it was a breakdance movie, a lot of music and dance. And I brought cast and crew from LA to work in the film, and 20 professional dancers. And to make a long story short, I fell in love with one of them. And she's now my wife for 40 years. And it was through this young woman that I decided to walk away from that life. Because people, I'll tell you this, I spent a lot of time in that life, grew up in it. And I always like to say this, I always want to be honest about it. It's an evil lifestyle, the mob. And I want to be clear, I'm not calling the guys evil. I was one of them, and I had many friends in that life. But I don't know any family of any member of that life that hasn't been totally devastated, including my own. And not my wife and kids I've been able to spare. Mother, father, brothers, and sisters. It's a devastating story that happened with my family. And that's true of every family, of every member of that life that I know. So I fell in love with this young girl. She was 20 years old. I said, am I going to put her through the same thing that everybody else was through? So I had to make a choice because at that point I had become a major target of law enforcement. I mean, I was arrested 18 times. I was indicted 7 times. I had 2 federal racketeering cases, one brought on by Giuliani. I had a state racketeering case here in Florida. And so I knew it was a matter of time. I had been acquitted in 5 trials that I had to go through. So they never predicted me that way, but I said it was only a matter of time before they got me because I had a big bullseye on my back and I didn't want to put her through. So I decided to try to make the break because of my love for her.
Gotcha. So now, over your career, right, you run more legitimate businesses than many entrepreneurs do today. And you've learned a lot of lessons along the way. There's one particular that I wanted to talk about, and that's negotiations and the value of preparation. Right here, there's a lot of negotiating happening between the buyers and sellers. And you did a video a little while ago about preparation, about negotiating. And when you talk about prep, that really resonated with me because I'm always talking about the value of prep. So can you talk a little bit about that? I want you to use 2 examples that you mentioned in that video. One example was what happens when you're well prepared, and that's the Jerry Gutterman contracting job. And then the other example is what happens when someone's not prepared, and that was that guy that asked you for a raise.
Well, basically, when you're on the street and you're as active as I was, and you're a captain, you had a lot of men under you, you're constantly in a negotiation, whether it be business or God for somebody's life or something like that. So if you don't master the art of negotiation, you don't really succeed and survive in that life. And for me, it was even a little bit more intense because I was one of the younger guys, and you're dealing with guys that have been in that life 20, 25 years. They were a lot older than me, a lot more experienced. And even sometimes I would outrank that person because when I became a captain, but you still had to know how to get around people and really know the method of negotiating. And I did that just about every day of my life during that time. And so I learned how to be very well prepared going into a negotiation, knowing what I wanted, what I would take if I couldn't get what I wanted, and what I would just leave the room for. And it became a skill that, I just had to master at that point. So, being prepared, knowing your, let's call him an opponent at this point, but knowing the person sitting on the opposite side of the table, knowing his personality, knowing what to expect when you get into the room is very important for me. Like I had sit downs with John Gotti, and, John was a difficult guy to deal with. Socially, he was great, but business-wise, he was very difficult because he had a tremendous ego, and you can never let him think that he was losing an argument. You had to figure out a way how to get what you want to let him think he wants. So, just things like that were very helpful to me in whatever success I enjoyed on the street. And obviously you bring that into the real world because, knowing what you want when you go into the room, knowing how to read the room is very important. And I learned a couple of things. My dad taught me something very young that I never left me. And that he always said, be a good listener. Let other people talk, absorb as much information as you can, and then respond intelligently. And I found out something. There were times when I might have been the smartest person in the room, but I didn't want anybody to know that. Because by me keeping quiet, they told me everything else that I needed to know. And it was just a tactic. And there's sometimes when you're not the smartest person in the room, and you don't want anybody to know that either. So what do? You keep quiet, you speak less. People don't know what you're thinking. Let them talk, and by the end of the time they talk, you know enough to make your way in that meeting. So, and people don't realize we're negotiating almost every day of our lives. But it could have been with our spouse, could be with our kids, could be our neighbor, anybody. So knowing how to negotiate is very, very important. It's vital. Now, I could tell a lot of stories there. We'd be here all day. Yeah.
So that contracting deal, it was your background, what you knew about them helps you to kind of get a positive outcome.
Absolutely. I did my homework first. That it was a very big deal with a very big contractor, Jerry Diner. And I just had to know, I actually brought the union into his main work sites that he had there on. We had a negotiated deal in order to make it work for him and work for us. So it was, that was just one of many. And there were times, quite honestly, when I was negotiating to somebody's life, because people in our life are always getting in trouble. And you had to learn how to negotiate in order to keep them alive, basically.
And that's failed negotiation, not on your part, but on that club, the guy from the club.
Well, no, there was a guy that I knew that I was trying to help him and his family out. So I had him, I said, look, I'm going to hire you. I'm going to have you go around to my gas stations and just collect the money. And they would give him the money. And I said, I'll give you $1,500 a week. And this was back in the early 80s. So after about a couple of weeks, a couple of months, he came back to me and said, I think I need a raise. And I said, you need a raise? You think you're worth $1,500 a week? I just gave you that. But what heck? And he started counting my money, as he was picking it off, So, I told him a good lesson, like, you're fired, and then rehired it right away. But, it's just, look, you know what? I found a secret in everything is just relationships and knowing how to deal with people. A lot of people have said to me along the way, I'll be honest with you, Mike, you're a brilliant businessman. You've done so many things and it worked out. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I am not a brilliant businessman. There are a lot of things that I won't do well and I don't like to do. And so I won't do it. Other people have been doing them a lot better than me. But I'd always said, I think two talents. Number one, I knew how to chew the good business. I had a pretty good sense of that, twine in the wine business and the pizza gourmet. And, then I knew how to hire the right people to do the job and manage them properly and incentivize them properly. So my motto for myself was always do what you do best, delegate the rest, and motivate them to get the best at it.
Gotcha.
Your people skills are important.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's a people business, and relationships matter. That's what we're doing here, starting those relationships. So, I wanted to talk briefly about social media and then get into the wine. So you have a huge social media following. I know your YouTube channel alone is over 1.7 million subscribers. Can you talk a little bit about how you use those platforms?
Well, yeah, and I can't take credit for it because, I'm a public speaker and I do a lot of speaking days throughout the year. And during the pandemic, I had about 43 days, I think, postponed. So my team said to me, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to stay home. I've been home like this for, 20 some odd years. It's great. No, you can't do that. You have to stay active. And so they tried to convince me to get on social media. I was dead set against it. And these young people know a lot more than I do about social media. But anyway, it took them about 3 months to convince me. And it was actually 5 years ago this August, this month, that I went on YouTube, and we just got very fortunate. I started to realize the power of social media as we continue to grow. And it's been a tremendous tool for my brands and our brands. And so we become very, very active in that. It's really helped us in business because we get, totally behind the product that we put out there. And social media is the way to go. I mean, if you're not active in social media, you don't have that advantage. It's a setback.
Yeah, definitely. I know my dad's a big fan. He did a very quick FaceTime with my dad before. So your current role as founder of Franzese Wine kind of ties everything together. Um, in a very unique way, because you bring everything to bear in that. Why did you start Franzese Wine?
Well, again, this wasn't my brainchild. I had a young man, my partner, each year, who emailed me, and he was 19 years old. And so I'd love to have lunch with you. So he drove down from Sacramento. I lived in Newport Beach. And I said, we could spend a half an hour together. We ended up spending 3 hours together. I was very impressed with the young man, just the way he carried himself, just the way he spoke. And so we stayed in contact. And then 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, he came to me. He said, Mike, my father's brother owns a vineyard in Armenia for the past 95 years. We want to introduce the wine into the United States, and we want you to be the brand. And I said, well, why? Why do I connect with that? And they told me, the story of wine is a transforming story from grapes through wine. And my story is a story of transformation. And they'd like to connect it. So I said, okay, I did my research, tasted the wine, wanted to see the price of the wines because I like to make my products available to everyone. And I like the wine, I like the price. And his family was very impressive to me. He's very family oriented, as we are. And his family had taken a Papa John's pizza that was bankrupt in Sacramento and built it up from one of the best pizza places there, franchises there. So they had a good work ethic. So we decided to get together on it, and it's been 3 years now, and we're very, very happy with where we are at this point in time.
Awesome. So how do you tie in your social media presence and help both engage your wine customers as well as to support the retailers? I wanted to give an example. There was a video you posted last year where you encouraged your followers to visit Ralph's, Mariano's, Kroger, or Save One to pick up a bottle of Franzese wine and celebrate second chances. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that works?
Well, yeah, we learned something. I didn't know anything. Look, I love wine. I mean, my grandfather was making wine in his basement. He came over here from Italy and served it to us when we were 10 years old. And we had to drink it, My dad is one of 19 kids. So we lived in Brooklyn, and my grandfather would make wine. We'd all be drinking it, not getting drunk, but drinking it when we were kids. So I love the wine, love Napa. I'd love to go to all these places. Been to Italy many times, Springs. But what happened when I first got into the business, I thought, okay, well, we'll have to get a distributor and they'll do all the work. And I realized we get a distributor, we do all the work, right? We'd have to be sure the product moves off the shelves. So that's when I started to realize the value of social media and the value of the platform that I had. So we really got actors behind our product and been very successful. And I'll tell you how we got to all of these chains. I went and sat down with Southern Glaciers, and we were talking about them taking us on initially. I didn't get a good feeling. I said, I'm not trying to, they're going to take us on. We're going to be on the back of the shelf. They got so many brands, and said, I don't feel good about it, and the way they presented it to us. So how are we going to get to any of these chains if we don't have a national distributor? So we were a little bit innovative, and then I made a video to all the wine buyers and all the various chains. That video got us to the appointment. When we got to the appointment, we sat down and we went over, we made our presentation, and they said, well, who's your distributor? I said, well, we don't have, but if we have you, we'll get a distributor. And that's how we got every single chain that we're in. We got them first, and then we got the distributor behind it. So point being that we got a little bit innovative, thinking out of the box, and then using social media to really drive people to the stores. But now, people go to the store and they look to a product. When it comes to us, they're already looking for the product in the store because we already educated them and introduced it to them, and it's been working. Last year at this time we were in 400 locations. Today we're in 34, and we'll probably be in 5,000 by the end of the year.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that. You mentioned before that when you were young, you would be at the table, have a little bit of wine, but now you have an MA wine that people can be more inclusive. Can you talk a little bit about that? By the way, I tried to be NA wine last year, and I had to check them out of place because they nailed it. They got on point. I thought it was the alcohol. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the fastest growing, variety in the industry right now. And we have a special process where we have our alcohol of wine and then we extract the alcohol out of it, leave the taste in it. And so far it's been really well received. Walmart picked it up now, I think, in 8 states, and they really expanded with us on it. We're doing well. We're promoting it and people are enjoying it, and that's the deal. So whatever product is working, that's the one that we really get behind. Yeah. And now we have our fruit wines, something that's pretty innovative. We have a pomegranate and a blackberry, and they've been flying off the shelves, quite honestly. I think the uniqueness of the bottle and the taste, I'm really not into pomegranate because I just don't like pomegranates, but the blackberry I like a lot. And it's been so well accepted in some of our chains that they've asked us to produce now a cherry and a strawberry. So we're doing that now also. But I think the younger crowd is going after that pretty big also, because I understand some of them are staying away from traditional wines. But there again, it's thinking outside of the box and bringing varieties in that we think people are going to enjoy, and then just standing behind it, get behind it on social media. I've done a lot. I'm not just a name on the bar. I know it appears that way sometimes, but I realize how much work we have to do. As a matter of fact, I'm working harder now at 74 than I've worked in a long time, but that's what it takes, to get behind this product. We've done a lot of in-store promotions, and I'm constantly on social media doing things, and we found it to be working.
Well, I know one thing I learned through social media was the backhanded pour. Use the word about it?
Oh yeah, everybody gets fascinated about this, but I don't want to be offensive to anybody, but whenever we were this was back in the day, when we were at a meeting and a bunch of us maid guys, and that's when you take the oath and become a member of that life, an official member, it says you were straightened out, or you're a made man of that life. So if there was a number of made men sitting at a table and we're discussing some business, and all of a sudden we might have realized somebody came to the table that we didn't really trust, we would pick up a bottle of wine and we'd start pouring it to everybody. And then when we got to that person, we would pour it like that. And everybody would be noticing that. And then they realize, something, this person can be trusted. So it's a trivia. We didn't just get up and say, hey, we don't like that guy. Yeah, we had to do it very suddenly.
So, I got a last question, and we'll do a quick Q&A for the audience. What's next? What we look forward to down the road, both for you and for the brand?
Well, listen, I got into these industries for a reason because they're both, and I'm not saying we're going in that direction, but, I always look to capitalizing whatever it is I'm doing in the right way. And they're two high exit industries, both, wine and pizza. And I can say this without being out of turn. Last week, I've been in the pizza now business for a while, mainly frozen pizza. We have vending machines, and we're now selling it in markets. We had a meeting at Starbucks that we've been working with now for about a year, and it's very possible that Slice's Pizza will be stole by Starbucks eventually, and that would be a big game changer for us in the industry. So, we're working on that. We're working on a line, constantly. It's a daily job for me, and of course, I'm out there speaking all the time. I'm writing books and just doing a lot of different things. And I want people to understand this. I'm probably the most blessed, most fortunate person that's ever going to address you about anything, because had I remained in that life, no question, I'd either be dead or in prison for the rest of my life. I mean, I was that much of a target. And to really drive that point home, in 1975, when I took an oath on Halloween night, there were 6 of us that night, and I'm the only one alive today. None of those men died of natural causes. All 5 of them were murdered. We had a big war in our family. We had 3 wars in our family during our time, and a lot of guys were killed. And to drive that home even further, in 1986, Fortune magazine wrote a huge story, 50 biggest and most powerful mob bosses in the country. And Saturday magazine, they featured 6 of us. I was one of the 6. And they actually had a chart with the 50 of us on there according to rank, wealth, and power. I was number 18 on the list, was the youngest guy on the list. And I always laugh about it, because how do they make a list like that? They didn't ask for a tax return, right? They just made a list. They made it up. They sold a lot of magazines. But what's not silly about that list is out of that list of 50 today, some 30 odd years later, 48 of those men are dead. Number 49 is doing life in prison. And I'm the only one alive and free. So to say that I'm blessed and fortunate, I am a person of faith. My wife was a young Christian girl who had a big impact on me. And by the way, when I decided to walk away from that life, I just couldn't say, hey guys, I'm busy, it wouldn't work out that way. You can't walk away. But I decided to take a plea. I took a plea on a big racketeering case, basically tax fraud. It was on this whole gasoline case. My partner, he can't even call me anything. And I took a 10-year prison sentence. I did 8 years on a 10. I spent 3 years rather in solitary confinement. I paid a $15 million restitution. I had a jet tie in Dukheim. I had a helicopter and a couple of boats here. And I gave it all up to the government. I had a big forfeiture clause. And I gave it all up just to be with my wife and to try to walk away from that life and live free, but the rest of my life. So it was very difficult, because when I walked away, my father was very upset with me for quite some time. There was a contract in my life. I mean, this is all, public record agreed anywhere. They've done a lot of media on me. But somehow I survived, and I just believe God had a different plan and a purpose for my life, quite honestly. And, I do a lot of charity work. I do a lot of work in prisons and speak with a lot of these young gangbangers and try to dissuade them. The way I got into speaking, very honestly, I was finishing up my 10-year prison sentence, and I was in solitary for 3 years. The government was very upset with me. They wanted me to cooperate. I wouldn't. And the FBI came to me after hunting me for years, and they said, we need a favor from you. And I said, favor? No favors for you guys, right? To make a long story short, Major League Baseball, the NBA, NFL, and NHL wanted me to participate in an anti-gambling video. They knew I had a big gambling operation on the street. We had a lot of athletes gamble with us. So I filmed a video for them while I was in prison. And when I got out, they asked me to come and speak to all the, Major League Baseball players, the NBA. So I started doing that in 1996, and I've been doing it ever since. And then in 1998, the NCAA jumped on board. I did a video for them, and since then I've spoken to over 350 universities, to all of the student athletes. We had a very good program dissuading them from gambling and keeping the right, contacts in their life, staying away from the kayak guys, so to speak. And it's been very effective, and I speak in churches, and I do a lot of corporate things with people, and I've been just given a second chance in life, so you try to make the most of it. And the wine business is something it's just a lot of fun, I'll be honest with you. I enjoy it, and we're having some success with it, so it's been a good bar. And wine and pizza, how can you go wrong?
All right, well, thank you so much. Congratulations for your success. You've been an inspiration to everybody. And everybody, we don't have time to Q&A, but he will be over at the grand tasting tonight.
We gotta let one or two.
All right, all right. If you don't have any questions to run to, anybody have a question?
Yes.
About negotiations, what was it like negotiating with the government?
That was my hardest negotiation. So, yes. It was about a 3-month negotiation that they were trying to give you 25 years and $100 million fine. And we got him down to 10 years and a $25 million fine or restitution. But it was difficult. But, I have leverage. It's very good in a negotiation to have letters. So, long story short, just prior to that, Rudy Giuliani indicted me on a big case. And I was on trial for 7 months, and I was acquitted in that case. They really thought they were going to convict me. And right after that, they indicted me on this gasoline case. So they really wanted a conviction on me. And that's when I decided to take the plea, because I said I have negotiating power with him, because they wanted conviction on me badly. I'd beaten them 5 times. So that was kind of the leverage that I needed to make a deal. And believe it or not, 10 years was like, they were giving guys 100 years, 50 years, 70 years. And I realized that if I got convicted, I was one of the youngest guys. They would give me 100 years, easily. As a matter of fact, Giuliani called me in the courtroom. He says, Franzese, I convict you on this, you're getting double what your father got. And my father got 50. He said, and I interviewed him a couple of months back on my channel. And I said, Rudy, you remember when you said that? And he said, yeah. I said, well, fortunately that didn't happen, because we wouldn't be sitting here today. And he's become a friend of mine now, believe it or not. Guy trying to put me away forever. But, the best way to defeat your enemies, make them your friends. Remember that. Good knowledge on the street. But anyway, good to have leverage, and it helped me in that. Because if I didn't go away and do that time, I wouldn't be sitting here. No question. Oh, anybody else?
Thanks for the talk. I guess my question is, for those of us who have kind of toyed with this idea of getting celebrities involved with our brands, like how would you recommend that we reach out to them? And then more importantly, it sounds like, your direct involvement with the brand is really what's helping to drive it. So how do you recommend you get them sort of on board as a active partner, not just a, face?
I'm going to tell you this. You can add a celebrity, but if they don't get behind it and do the work, you're spending money needlessly. And I've heard that said so many times before. And what I tell people the truth, I'm not just a name on the bottle. We put the work in. I can't tell you how many dinners and wine tastings I've done. I'm constantly on social media pushing, even for the big chains. We just did a big thing for Walmart. We got 100,000 views in 2 or 3 days, and we drove a lot, not Walmart, I'm sorry, Costco. And got 100,000 views in 2 days, and we were driving people to the stores, and they appreciate that. And so that's what we do. I realized when I seen that the distributors, I'm sorry if they don't do the work, and we had to do the work, because what's the sense of getting into change, and then 3 months later, they're going to throw you out, you're not moving the product. So we really, really got behind it, and it's worked for us. And that's what we'll do for anybody that we're involved. So to answer your question, you get the celebrity, but they got to work for you too. Just because they're out there doesn't mean it's not a guarantee. So remember that. You get involved with us and offer you shouldn't refuse. We always quote that famous bond, right?
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
And my friends, before I go, I want to remind you, Franzese Wine, I now have a wine branded in my name from the world's oldest vineyards. We have alcoholic wine, of course, non-alcoholic wine, huge seller now. And the taste is terrific, my friends, really. You're going to enjoy this family atmosphere, wherever you want. It's wonderful wine. You're going to enjoy the taste. You're going to love it. I guarantee it. So go to franzesewine.com before we sell out, because it's moving fast. That's an offer, once again, you can't refuse, with a taste you're going to love.